There is no greater war than the one that rages silently within a man. This battle is not fought with swords, nor is it settled with fists. It is a war between your mind and your emotions, between what you know and what you feel. And the one who wins this battle determines the quality, direction, and impact of your life. You were never designed to be led by how you feel. Feelings are temporary, unstable, and often deceptive. They shift with the wind, move with the moment, and bow to circumstances. But your mind, your God-given intellect, was created to govern, to discern, and to guide. The moment you allow your emotions to lead your decisions, you abdicate your throne and give your crown to a servant that was never meant to rule. Your mind is the seat of reason, and reason is the platform of rulership. No king builds a nation on moods. No leader sustains vision on feelings. Vision requires clarity, and clarity is the child of thought, not emotion. Emotions scream, but truth speaks quietly. It takes a trained mind to hear truth when emotions are loud. Too many people have destroyed their destiny because they reacted instead of responded. They spoke when they should have paused. They struck when they should have reflected. They walked away when they should have endured. Emotion, when untrained, is a destroyer of legacy. And so the first task of every leader, every parent, every business owner, every visionary, is to bring their emotions into submission to the mind. Your mind was given to you to lead your life with understanding. But if you don't feed it truth, it will echo fear. If you don't discipline it, it will serve your pain. If you don't renew it, it will recycle the same emotional reactions that have sabotaged your life again and again. When your mind is untrained, your emotions become educators, and they are poor teachers. Pain will teach you to hide. Rejection will teach you to isolate. Disappointment will teach you to lower your expectations. But a trained mind sees past the moment. It knows that pain is temporary, that storms pass, and that feelings are not facts. Training your mind is not a one-day task. It is a daily commitment. It's reading what builds you. It's listening to what strengthens you. It's surrounding yourself with wise voices who challenge your reactions and call you to a higher standard. A trained mind is not reactive. It is reflective. It does not panic in crisis. It finds purpose in chaos. It doesn't follow moods. It obeys mission. Every great leader in history had the ability to stand still while the world around them shook. Why? Because they mastered themselves before they tried to master the world. They trained their mind to interpret life through vision, not emotion. Keep quit, but the mind said keep going. Emotion said lash out, but the mind said speak with wisdom. Emotions said retaliate, but the mind said respond with purpose. There is a law that cannot be ignored. You cannot control life, but you can control how you respond to life. And your response is the seed of your result. If you allow your emotions to run untrained, your life will be a series of unnecessary battles and irreversible regrets. But if your mind is trained to lead, your life will be a story of strategic decisions and undeniable impact. Let me tell you something most people ignore. The strength of a man is not in how much he lifts, but in how much he restrains. Self-control is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. A person who can rule over their feelings is stronger than one who can conquer nations. The battlefield is not out there. It is within you. Your real enemy is not your situation. It's your reaction to the situation. And the only way to win is to train your mind to think higher. Train your mind in truth, and emotions will fall in line. Train your mind in purpose, and feelings will lose their power to distract. Train your mind in vision, and moods will bow to mission. Because when your mind is strong, your emotions become servants, not masters. You are too powerful to be led by moods. You are too called to be confused by feelings. You are too gifted to let anger, fear, shame, or pride dictate your next move. Purpose demands clarity. Destiny demands maturity. Destiny demands discipline. Train it. Mind, speak to it. Feed it. Discipline it. Strengthen it. Because if you win the war within, nothing outside you can conquer you. You were never created to be ruled by emotions. Your mind was designed to lead, not follow. This is not merely a motivational idea. It is a spiritual and foundational truth. From the very beginning, man was given dominion. Not just dominion over the earth, animals and systems, but over himself. The original blueprint of humanity included sovereignty over thought, decision, and emotion. Your mind was designed to function as the control tower of your life. When your mind is in charge, life moves in order. When your emotions take the wheel, chaos becomes normal. Too often, people assume that feelings are a natural guide for decision-making. They are not. Emotions are responses, not instructions. They are signals, not leaders. They can alert you to something happening, but they must never be allowed to decide what happens next. You were created with a mind that reflects reason, order, logic, discernment, and divine intention. Your emotions, on the other hand, were never meant to dictate your choices. They were meant to serve your mind, not sabotage it. Emotions fluctuate. They respond to temperature, tone, timing, and triggers. One day you feel like a champion, the next you feel like a failure, and nothing may have even changed externally. That is the evidence that emotions are not stable enough to build on. And yet too many people base life-altering decisions on temporary emotions. They walk away from marriages because they don't feel love. They quit assignments because they don't feel appreciated. They abandon purpose because they don't feel motivated. What they fail to understand is that their feelings are not the truth. They are simply interpretations of their current internal state, which is often shaped by unchecked thoughts, unresolved wounds, and mismanaged expectations. When you allow emotions to lead, you hand over your authority. You reduce yourself from a ruler to a reactor. You no longer decide, you respond. And this is the tragedy, that many people who were meant to reign in life have become slaves to their moods. Emotions were given to make life rich, not reckless. They are a blessing when aligned, but a burden when allowed to dominate. That is why the most powerful people are not the most emotional, but the most disciplined. They don't let how they feel determine what they do. They let what they know shape what they feel. The mind is the gatekeeper of the soul, and when it is strong, the emotions come into order. Think of the mind as the steering wheel and the emotions as the passengers. The passengers can sing, shout, cry, or laugh, but they don't determine the direction of the car. The driver does. If you ever let a passenger take the wheel, you're heading for a crash. Many lives have crashed not because the road was hard, but because the emotions were in control. A person who is led by emotion is like a ship without a rudder, easily tossed, easily moved, never arriving. But a person who trains their mind to lead lives with direction, confidence, and impact. They understand that leadership starts within. Training your mind to lead means feeding it with truth, not just information. Information is common, but truth is rare. And truth has the power to settle you when your emotions are shaking. Truth reminds you of who you are, even when your feelings scream otherwise. Feelings will tell you you're not good enough, not loved, not seen, not capable. But truth tells you that you were fearfully and wonderfully made, that you are chosen, called, and crowned with glory. When your mind is full of truth, your emotions lose the power to deceive you. But truth is not absorbed by accident. It is trained into the mind. The mind, like the body, requires exercise. It must be disciplined. It must be taught. It must be renewed. Otherwise, it will default to emotional patterns picked up in childhood, culture, or crisis. The untrained mind becomes a sponge that soaks in every emotional wave and leaves the person drowning in confusion. But a trained mind becomes a filter. It evaluates, separates, and discards emotional impulses that don't align with vision, values, or wisdom. People who don't train their mind end up training their emotions to be dominant. Every time you let your anger have its way, you reinforce the idea that anger rules. Every time you let fear stop you, you teach your soul that fear is your leader. Every time you react in pain, you empower that pain to govern your future. This is not just a habit, it becomes a lifestyle. People wonder why they always feel overwhelmed, broken, or lost. It is because they are living from a place of emotion instead of conviction. The mind has been silenced by the volume of ungoverned feelings. The path to mastery is not about suppressing emotion. It is about placing it under the rule of a sound, trained mind. You don't silence fear by pretending it's not there. You silence fear by speaking truth to it. You don't ignore anger. You identify its root and respond with clarity. This is the role of the mind, to ask questions, to discern intentions, to challenge assumptions, to bring light into emotional darkness. Without the mind in charge, you become emotionally impulsive, and emotional impulsivity is the enemy of wise decision-making. There is a reason that people with emotional mastery are trusted more. They can be calm in crisis. They can be firm without being harsh. They can lead without being led by offense or bitterness. It is not because they don't feel. It is because their mind has been trained to interpret emotion through purpose. Purpose brings order. When your mind is aligned with your purpose, your emotions begin to serve that purpose. Joy enhances your mission. Anger fuels your justice. Sadness deepens your compassion. Fear teaches you caution without paralyzing you. The same emotions that once ruled you now serve you, because your mind took its rightful place on the throne. Every person has emotional storms, but the one who trains their mind builds an anchor. That anchor keeps you from drifting when everything inside you wants to run, scream, fight, or hide. And here's the mystery: once your mind is trained to lead, your emotions begin to respect it. The storm loses its power. The waves may still come, but they no longer dictate your direction. You move by truth, not by turbulence. You act by decision, not by impulse. You reign, not react. You think, not flinch. Because your mind has been placed where it was always meant to be, in authority. Emotions are excellent passengers, but dangerous drivers. They can accompany you on your journey, giving color, richness, and depth to your experiences. They can laugh with you, weep with you, celebrate with you, and even caution you. But the moment you allow them to take the wheel, the moment they become the ones deciding your direction, you have placed your life in the hands of something that was never designed to lead. That is where most people go wrong, not because they feel too much, but because they let their feelings dictate too much. Feelings were meant to support your decisions, not to make them. And yet, countless individuals have allowed temporary emotions to make permanent choices. That's like letting a crying child pilot an aircraft simply because the tears were loud. It's chaos disguised as passion, destruction packaged in impulse. The person who is driven by emotions is like a city without walls, open to every passing influence, vulnerable to every slight change in temperature, mood, or moment. They become slaves to the atmosphere around them. If the environment is peaceful, they are calm. If it's hostile, they react. If they feel love, they smile. If they feel rejected, they retreat. They are not living from within. They are driven from without. And anything that drives you from outside has the power to control you. True authority in life is internal. It is when you make a decision and your emotions obey. That is the order of a disciplined soul. But when emotions are in charge, reason becomes a prisoner and truth is often ignored. Emotions, when given the role of driver, do not consider the cost of the journey. They only see the impulse of the moment. Anger says, speak now, even if it costs you your peace later. Lust says, act now, even if it destroys trust. Pride says, resist now, even if it blocks reconciliation. Fear says, run now, even if it makes your life smaller. But when your mind is in control, it considers the consequence, the ripple effect, the long-term picture. The mind is sober. The emotions are often intoxicated by urgency. The mind sees the future. Emotions see only the now. The mind builds while unchecked emotions often break. One of the most subtle traps in life is the belief that because an emotion feels real, it must be right. But reality and righteousness are not the same. You may feel justified in reacting with anger, but that doesn't mean it's the wisest course. You may feel overwhelmed with sadness, but that doesn't mean you should isolate and shut everyone out. Emotions are not evil, they are indicators. But indicators are not decision makers. The warning light on a car's dashboard is helpful, but if it starts driving the car, that's a disaster. That's how emotion must be treated. Acknowledged, respected, but never handed control. It is important to remember that emotions amplify the moment, but the mind sustains the mission. You cannot fulfill your purpose on emotion alone. There will be days you feel like quitting, days you feel invisible, days you feel unappreciated. If you let those feelings drive you, you will abandon what you were born to complete. Destiny cannot be entrusted to moods. It requires stability, and stability comes from structure, not sentiment. The one who builds their life on emotional responses is always rebuilding. Today they build in love, tomorrow they destroy in offense. Today they commit, tomorrow they withdraw. They are always starting over because their emotions keep changing the blueprint. That is why emotional leadership is unstable. It builds nothing permanent. Even in relationships, you see the danger of emotional driving. One moment of uncontrolled emotion can sever a connection built over years. A harsh word said in anger, a silent treatment born of pride, an impulsive action out of jealousy. These are the results of letting emotions drive. Love must be led by choice, not mood. Friendship must be guarded by honor, not impulse. Communication must be ruled by wisdom, not outburst. When the mind leads, relationships deepen. When emotions lead, they fracture. People who are led by emotions tend to live in cycles. Emotional highs lead to unrealistic commitments, which lead to inevitable disappointments, followed by withdrawal or regret. Then the cycle repeats. These individuals feel deeply, but they do not lead themselves wisely. That's why emotional awareness is not enough. You must also develop emotional mastery. It is not just feeling what you feel, but deciding what to do with it. It is knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to wait, when to push and when to rest. All these decisions require a driver who can see further than the emotion can feel. Many people confuse emotion with truth, but emotion often has no foundation in reality. You can feel abandoned even when you're surrounded by love. You can feel like a failure even while succeeding. You can feel afraid even when there is no real threat. That is why emotions cannot be trusted to lead. They distort perception, exaggerate problems, and minimize progress. They are driven by perception, not always by fact. And perception is shaped by memory, expectation, mood, fatigue, past trauma, and even hunger. Imagine handing the keys of your life over to something so volatile. That is why many lives are lost. Not to death, but to dysfunction. Lives that could have soared have instead settled, because emotions were allowed to call the shots. There's a reason pilots are trained to fly by instrument, not by what they see or feel. In fog, in storms, in turbulence, what you feel in the cockpit can deceive you. The instruments give the true reading. Your mind, trained by truth, is the instrument. Your emotions are the fog. If you fly by emotion, you crash in confusion. If you fly by trained thought, you land in purpose. That's why discipline of thought is not optional for the person who desires to fulfill purpose. You don't just need motivation, you need mental mastery. People often wait until disaster hits before they realize they've been living emotionally. The relationship ends. The opportunity is lost. The peace is gone. And then they reflect. But emotional mastery requires foresight, not just hindsight. It means you don't wait for damage to assess direction. You train yourself now so you're not driven later. You build a foundation strong enough to resist emotional storms. You know how to feel without being overwhelmed. You know how to acknowledge pain without becoming bitter. You know how to process anger without releasing destruction. That is what makes emotions excellent passengers. They add value to the ride. They bring joy, they bring beauty, they bring richness. But they must remain passengers. Let them speak, but don't let them steer. Let them teach, but don't let them decide. Let them ride, but never let them drive. Mastering emotions begins with mastering your thoughts. Every feeling follows a thought. Nothing you have ever felt happened in isolation. Emotions are not born out of thin air. They are the children of thought. Whether conscious or subconscious, every emotion has a seed. And that seed is a thought that was either entertained, accepted, or repeated. The mind is the womb of emotion. When you hold a thought long enough, it begins to produce a feeling. That feeling grows, matures, and eventually gives birth to behavior. And so, if you desire to change how you feel, you must trace it back to how you think. Emotion is a fruit, thought is the root. If the fruit is bitter, check the root. If you constantly feel fearful, discouraged, angry, or anxious, the problem is not the feeling. The problem is the thought that created it. The challenge for many people is that their thoughts are not deliberate. They are automatic, inherited, or reactive. They don't choose what to think. They simply respond to the thoughts that rise up out of memory, culture, trauma, or habit. These thoughts form an invisible belief system, and that belief system becomes the emotional thermostat of their life. You cannot rise above what you believe, and you cannot feel beyond what you think. If a person believes they are not worthy, every compliment will feel suspicious. If a person believes they are unloved, even genuine acts of kindness will feel insufficient. The emotion of rejection is rooted in the thought of unworthiness. The emotion of fear is rooted in the thought of danger. The emotion of joy is rooted in the thought of abundance or connection. This is why you must take responsibility for what you think, because what you think will always shape what you feel. The mistake many people make is that they try to change their emotions without changing their thoughts. They seek peace but continue to meditate on chaos. They want to feel love but keep entertaining thoughts of betrayal and abandonment. They want joy but feed their mind constant negativity, comparison, and complaint. That is like planting weeds and expecting roses. The mind will produce what you plant in it. Every thought is a seed, and your emotional life is the garden. If you are constantly anxious, it is because anxiety-producing thoughts have been planted, watered, and protected. And those thoughts may not even be current. They might be leftover thoughts from past pain or childhood trauma. But as long as those thoughts are allowed to live in your mental soil, the emotions they produce will also remain alive. Your emotions do not lie, but they do reflect the truth of what you believe. If you often feel overwhelmed, it's because your thoughts are overburdened. If you feel hopeless, your thoughts have ceased to imagine possibility. If you feel envious, your thoughts are focused on what you lack rather than what you carry. This is not to condemn the emotion, but to shine a light on its origin. Because if you can trace a feeling back to a thought, you can change the outcome. You are not helpless to emotion. You are simply unaware of the thought patterns that keep producing it. The mind, if untrained, becomes a factory for emotion based on whatever enters its doors. If you let in fear-filled news, it will produce anxiety. If you let in betrayal narratives, it will produce suspicion. If you let in scarcity mindsets, it will produce greed or fear. But when the mind is guarded and trained, it becomes a gatekeeper. It does not just absorb, it filters. It questions what enters. It measures every thought against the truth. When the mind is trained, it refuses to meditate on thoughts that do not serve purpose. It rejects lies. It uproots unhealthy patterns. It challenges assumptions. It replaces distortion with clarity. And as the thoughts change, the emotional climate begins to shift. You can tell what kind of thoughts a person has been thinking by watching their emotional pattern. The person who is quick to anger has been meditating on injustice or disrespect. The person who is often joyful has been meditating on gratitude, purpose, or faith. The person who is bitter has been meditating on past wounds. The person who is fearful has been meditating on potential loss or danger. These emotions are simply mirrors, reflecting the mind's internal meditation. This is why emotional mastery begins with thought management. You cannot feel right if you think wrong. No matter how much you want peace, if your thoughts are full of turmoil, the peace will not come. It will remain elusive, because peace is not a feeling you chase. It is the result of thoughts that are aligned with truth, security, and trust. The power of the mind is that it can choose what to think. You are not a slave to passing thoughts. You are not required to believe everything that enters your head. You are not obligated to accept every voice that speaks in your mind. You have the authority to choose. And with that choice comes the power to shift your emotions. If a thought makes you feel powerless, you can replace it with one that reminds you of your strength. If a thought makes you feel rejected, you can replace it with one that reminds you of your value. If a thought makes you feel afraid, you can replace it with one that builds courage. This is not denial, it is discipline. Discipline over the mind leads to freedom in emotion. But this discipline must be daily. The mind is not transformed in one day. It is trained through repetition. You must become intentional about what you think. You must interrupt thoughts that produce emotions you no longer want to feel. You must observe the patterns. Ask yourself, what thought led me to feel this? What belief gave this emotion permission to rise? What story am I repeating in my head that is producing this pain? Once you identify the thought, you can uproot it, you can challenge it, you can replace it with truth. And the moment you do, the emotion will begin to shift. Sometimes slowly, sometimes instantly, but it will shift, because emotion cannot survive long without its parent thought. This is how freedom comes, not through suppression of emotion, but through transformation of thought. The mind is the master key. As you master it, your emotional life comes into order. You no longer feel like a victim of mood swings or emotional storms. You become steady. You become grounded. You can feel without being overwhelmed. You can be honest without being dominated, because you have gone to the source, the thought. And once the source changes, everything downstream changes. The mind, once renewed, becomes a fountain of strength. It becomes a well of clarity. It produces emotions that align with peace, purpose, love, and discipline. And that is the beginning of emotional mastery. Not in trying harder to feel better, but in thinking higher to live better. Your dominion in life is directly connected to your ability to respond, not react. This is a truth that governs not only leadership, but also maturity, peace, and fulfillment. There is a vast difference between responding and reacting, and that difference determines the quality of your relationships, your decisions, and your destiny. A reaction is automatic, impulsive, and emotionally charged. It is the result of untrained emotions and undisciplined thought. A response, on the other hand, is intentional, thoughtful, and grounded in purpose. The person who reacts is led by emotion, while the one who responds is led by principle. Reaction is the behavior of someone who has given up control of themselves. Response is the evidence of someone who has mastered themselves. The greatest leaders, the wisest voices, and the most impactful individuals in history were not the ones who reacted to pressure. They were the ones who knew how to respond under pressure. And the same is true for anyone who desires to live a life of influence and stability. When you react, you give your power away. You let someone else's words determine your behavior. You let an environment dictate your internal state. You allow circumstances to govern your decisions. This is emotional slavery, where your soul is constantly in bondage to the mood of the moment. But when you respond, you reclaim your power. You decide how to interpret the situation. You choose your words instead of unleashing them. You direct your energy instead of scattering it. You do not allow pressure to deform your purpose. This is emotional sovereignty. It is when you sit on the throne of your own soul and declare, I will not be moved by circumstance. I will not be provoked into foolishness. I will lead myself before I try to lead others. The reason so many people live in constant turmoil is not because their environment is too intense. It's because their reactions are too ungoverned. Every time something doesn't go their way, they explode. Every time someone offends them, they retreat. Every time they feel discomfort, they quit. They are always in survival mode, emotionally unstable, mentally exhausted, and spiritually drained. Not because life is harder for them, but because they have never learned the power of a response. A response requires pause. It requires reflection. It requires stepping back from the heat of the moment to ask, what is the wise thing to do here? But when you react, there is no space between the trigger and the behavior. The emotion speaks and the body obeys. That is not dominion. That is defeat dressed in defensiveness. Every human interaction offers an opportunity to choose response over reaction. Someone disrespects you. Do you attack them back, or do you answer with dignity? Someone disappoints you. Do you lash out, or do you speak truth in love? Someone misunderstands you. Do you demand to be heard, or do you wait for the right time to bring clarity? These are not minor decisions. These are moments that define your character. Because your legacy will not be built on how you felt. It will be built on how you responded. Emotion can scream, but it is wisdom that must speak. And wisdom only speaks in silence. That silence is the space between trigger and response, and that space is where dominion is born. Reacting is easy. It takes no training, no maturity, and no vision. A child can react. A wounded soul can react. But a whole person learns to respond. Response is evidence that you are thinking higher than the moment. That you are not just seeing what happened, but what could happen if you act in wisdom. A response is strategic. It understands the bigger picture. It weighs the cost. It calculates the impact. It is not impulsive. It is intentional. The person who has trained themselves to respond does not just avoid unnecessary conflict. They also position themselves to influence others, build trust, and create solutions. Because people follow those who are emotionally steady, not emotionally unstable. They respect those who can remain calm in crisis. They are drawn to those who can see the storm and still stand strong. Many of the wounds people carry today were not caused by the event, but by someone's reaction to the event. A harsh word, a careless action, a moment of rage. It only took a few seconds to react, but the consequences lasted years. Entire relationships have been destroyed by reactions, opportunities lost, reputation stained, peace forfeited. All because someone allowed their emotions to lead their behavior instead of allowing their wisdom to lead their response. And this is the sobering truth. Emotions are temporary, but their reactions can have permanent consequences. That is why training your response is one of the greatest investments you will ever make in your life. Training yourself to respond means developing the habit of pause. It means resisting the urge to act immediately and instead giving yourself a moment to breathe, to think, to process. It means asking yourself, what outcome do I really want here? And letting that answer guide your behavior. It means choosing to align your actions with your values, not your emotions. It means understanding that just because something feels urgent doesn't mean it deserves an urgent reaction. Maturity is found in the ability to delay gratification, to hold your peace, to restrain your anger, to measure your words. That is not weakness. That is mastery. That is what it means to rule your own spirit. The one who rules his own spirit is greater than one who takes a city. Why? Because external victories are temporary, but internal victories build eternal foundations. Conquering your reactions builds the kind of character that can be trusted with influence, responsibility, and authority. It makes you the kind of person who can be promoted without becoming proud, criticized without becoming bitter, and challenged without becoming shaken. Because your stability no longer comes from how people treat you, but from how you choose to respond to them. That is dominion. That is kingdom living. That is emotional mastery. When you respond, you become the architect of the moment. You design the interaction. You shape the environment. You control the atmosphere. You choose the temperature. People may come at you with fire, but you do not have to burn. They may come with chaos, but you do not have to be shaken. They may come with offense, but you do not have to be offended. Response is a shield. It protects your peace, your purpose, and your progress. It creates space for reconciliation, for clarity, for wisdom to do its work. It tells the world, I am not a puppet of my emotions. I am a steward of my decisions. Even in your relationship with yourself, response is critical. When you make a mistake, do you react with shame and self-condemnation? Or do you respond with truth and correction? When you feel overwhelmed, do you react by numbing escaping, or quitting? Or do you respond by resetting, realigning, and recharging? The way you respond to your own weaknesses will determine your growth. If you react with judgment, you will stay stuck. But if you respond with compassion and responsibility, you will rise, because response opens the door to transformation. It invites maturity. It builds resilience. To live a life of dominion is to become skilled in the art of response. To rule your emotions, your words, your impulses. To see the moment, feel the pressure, hear the noise, and still choose your action from a place of wisdom, not reaction. That is the mark of the mature. That is the evidence of self-leadership. And that is the pathway to lasting peace, powerful relationships, and purposeful living. The person who responds instead of reacting is the one who lives with authority, walks in clarity, and builds a life that cannot be shaken by emotion, provocation, or circumstance. If you don't train your mind, life will train your emotions for you, usually through pain. Life is a relentless teacher, and it doesn't wait for you to be ready before it begins its lessons. Every experience, every encounter, every disappointment, every moment of pressure carries with it an emotional imprint. If you do not consciously take control of your inner world, the outer world will begin to shape you in ways you never consented to. And most of the time, that shaping will not make you stronger. It will make you reactive, fearful, defensive, bitter, or numb. Life does not train you with mercy, it trains you with consequences. The untrained mind absorbs every blow, and the untrained emotion reacts to every hit. If you don't step into the role of trainer, life will train you to believe that chaos is normal, that anxiety is your identity, and that survival is your only option. The mind, when left unattended, becomes a sponge, soaking up every message, every fear, every insult, every failure, and every trauma without filtering or questioning them. Those unchecked thoughts then begin to craft beliefs, and those beliefs govern your emotional state. Before long, you don't even realize that your emotions are not being chosen. They're being dictated by everything around you. You feel unworthy because life taught you that your worth is tied to performance. You feel unloved because life taught you that love is conditional. You feel afraid because life taught you that loss is always around the corner. None of those emotions were born from truth. They were born from pain. And pain has a voice. It whispers lies and wraps them in feelings so powerful that they feel real. But what feels real and what is real are not always the same. A trained mind knows the difference, but an untrained one does not. When the mind is untrained, pain becomes the professor. And pain does not grade on kindness. It teaches through repetition. It will keep sending the same lesson, the same test, the same storm until you choose to respond differently. The breakup feels the same. The rejection feels the same. The anger rises in the same way. The loneliness echoes the same silence. Why? Because the lesson has not been learned. Pain continues until growth begins. And growth begins with a decision to no longer be shaped by life passively, but to take authority over your thoughts actively. You can either be shaped by design or by default. If you don't decide who you are and how you want to live, life will decide for you. And it will base that decision on fear, not faith, on trauma, not truth. There is no neutral ground in the soul. You are either renewing your mind daily, or you are being conditioned by the noise of the world. The media, your past, your critics, your disappointments, your failures, if left unchallenged, all of them become instructors. And your emotions become students. You begin to cry on cue, panic without thought, withdraw without warning, explode without reason. You don't know why you feel what you feel. You just know the emotion arrives uninvited, unfiltered, and often unmanageable. That is the life of someone who has never trained their mind to guard the gate. Because the gate is always open, the enemy doesn't even have to knock. He walks right in, carrying thoughts that produce emotions that paralyze progress and distort identity. When you train your mind, you are not pretending that life doesn't hurt. You are deciding that life's pain will not have the final say. You are not ignoring reality. You are deciding which reality you will believe. The outer reality may say you're alone, but your trained mind remembers that you are never forsaken. The situation may look like failure, but your trained mind sees the lesson and prepares for a comeback. The emotion may scream, give up, but your trained mind whispers, this is not the end. That inner whisper is the fruit of mental training. It is the voice that pulls you out of emotional spirals and calls you back to purpose. Training your mind is not a one-time event. It is a lifestyle. You do not go to the gym once and expect your body to remain strong for life. The same is true with your mind. Daily discipline is required. You must feed it truth, challenge it with wisdom, stretch it with new understanding, rest it with peace, and guard it with intention. And when the mind becomes strong, it begins to discipline the emotions. It tells anger, you will not speak today. It tells fear, you are not in charge here. It tells sadness, I see you, but I will not sink in you. That level of authority is not reserved for the superhuman. It is available to anyone who is willing to commit to the process. Emotions that are constantly trained by pain begin to expect pain. That's why some people cannot receive love. It feels foreign. They've been trained to expect betrayal, to anticipate abandonment, to prepare for disappointment. And so when good things arrive, they sabotage them. Not because they are ungrateful, but because their emotions have been conditioned by wounds. They are reacting not to the present, but to the echo of the past. This is why the mind must intervene. The mind must say, this is a new season. That was a different person. This is not the same scenario. Only a trained mind can differentiate between what was and what is. Without that differentiation, your emotions will keep living in old places, even when your life has moved forward. The untrained mind allows history to become prophecy. If you've been rejected before, you expect it again. If you've been hurt before, you assume it will repeat. The emotion of fear begins to build a forecast of pain, and you begin to live according to it. Opportunities are declined. Relationships are pushed away. Risks are avoided. All because the emotion was trained by pain, and the mind did not interrupt it. But the trained mind begins to break the cycle. It begins to separate experience from identity. It begins to rewrite the narrative. It begins to challenge every limiting belief that pain once planted. It begins to train the emotion to expect healing, not harm. Restoration, not ruin. Love, not loss. That is the power of internal training. It doesn't deny pain, but it refuses to let pain shape the future. Most people want emotional peace, but they avoid mental discipline. They want the fruit without the root. They want calm feelings, but do not want to confront chaotic thoughts. But the truth is, until you confront the beliefs that have shaped your emotions, your peace will be temporary. It will last only until the next trigger, the next disappointment, the next failure. But when your mind is trained, peace becomes a position, not just a feeling. You live from it. You think from it. You speak from it. Because your mind is no longer being tossed by every wave of life. It has learned to anchor itself in purpose, truth, and clarity. It's important to recognize that pain can be a teacher, but it is a cruel one. Its lessons come with bruises. Its instruction comes with scars. It's better to train your mind before life forces the lesson. It's better to choose wisdom before crisis demands it. You do not have to learn everything through brokenness. You can learn through awareness, through intention, through deliberate focus, through feeding your mind what builds instead of what breaks. Because the more you train your mind, the less power life has to train you through suffering. You begin to live proactively, not reactively. You begin to lead your emotions instead of apologizing for them. You begin to walk in authority instead of drowning in reaction. Because your mind, no longer passive, becomes the command center of a life led by vision, not by pain. The evidence of maturity is not age but emotional discipline. Rule your spirit and you'll rule your world. Many assume that growing older automatically means growing wiser. But time alone does not bring maturity. Time only passes. Maturity is not measured by how many years you've lived, but by how well you manage yourself within those years. It is revealed not in how much you know, but in how you behave when what you know is tested by emotion. It's easy to act wise when everything is calm. The real proof of maturity appears when you're under pressure, provoked, disappointed, or misunderstood. In those moments, when your emotions rise like a storm and demand to speak, act, or run, it is your ability to rule your spirit that distinguishes the mature from the immature. Emotional discipline is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about choosing what you do with what you feel. The person who cannot control their spirit becomes a slave to their circumstances. They live life on an emotional roller coaster, constantly at the mercy of whatever happens to them. If someone offends them, they explode. If life delays them, they panic. If someone disagrees with them, they become defensive. They are not governing themselves. They are being governed by every shifting emotion. That is not maturity, that is vulnerability. And when a person lacks emotional discipline, they make dangerous decisions. They burn bridges, speak words they cannot take back, and abandon paths they were meant to finish. They apologize often, but they repeat the same emotional patterns. They are always repairing the damage of their reactions instead of building on the strength of their responses. A life ruled by emotion is a life constantly rebuilding what was destroyed by emotional impulsiveness. True emotional discipline starts with self-awareness. You cannot rule what you do not recognize. Many people believe they are peaceful simply because they avoid conflict, or that they are patient simply because they stay silent. But silence is not always discipline. Sometimes it is fear or resentment or passivity disguised as maturity. Real discipline is internal management. It means you know what you feel, but you do not allow that feeling to dictate your behavior. You feel anger, but you remain kind. You feel anxious, but you move forward anyway. You feel discouraged, but you stay committed. You do not let the emotion make the decision. That is strength. That is maturity. Emotional discipline is what separates leaders from followers. Anyone can react, but a leader must respond. Anyone can speak, but a leader must speak with clarity. Anyone can express themselves, but a leader must discern the right moment, the right tone, and the right words. Leadership is not just about casting vision, it's about managing emotion. When those around you are anxious, can you stay calm? When those around you are confused, can you offer clarity? When those around you are afraid, can you anchor them with courage? These are not gifts. They are the result of discipline. They are practiced. They are intentional. They are cultivated in private long before they are revealed in public. Many relationships fail not because of lack of love, but because of lack of emotional discipline. One partner reacts with blame instead of responding with honesty. One friend shuts down instead of choosing to communicate. One family member explodes instead of choosing to listen. The lack of control in those moments opens wounds, deepens distance, and erodes trust. Love may still exist, but without discipline, that love cannot grow. Discipline provides the space for love to express itself in a healthy way. When you can control your tone, choose your timing, guard your words, and own your feelings, you protect the relationship. You create safety. You build trust. You make room for reconciliation. But where discipline is absent, emotions take over and relationships become battlegrounds. In every area of life, emotional discipline becomes your advantage. In business, it allows you to make decisions based on principle, not panic. In crisis, it gives you the ability to lead with poise. In disappointment, it keeps you from falling into despair. In success, it keeps you grounded in humility. Discipline anchors you when emotion wants to drift. It is your internal governor, keeping your soul steady even when the winds of life blow hard. That steadiness becomes a beacon to others. People trust those who are consistent. They follow those who are emotionally stable. They listen to those who can stay calm in conflict. It's not because those people don't feel. They feel deeply. But they've trained themselves to feel without losing control. Emotional discipline also protects your potential. Every time you give in to emotional chaos, you delay your progress. Every outburst, every shutdown, every impulsive decision pushes your destiny further out of reach. It costs you time, energy, focus, and often relationships. Discipline, on the other hand, keeps you aligned. It reminds you of who you are. It keeps you focused on what truly matters. It teaches you to pause, to pray, to reflect, to choose. And every time you choose discipline over reaction, you strengthen your character, you build emotional muscle, you become someone who can be trusted. Not just by others, but by your future self. The process of developing emotional discipline is not glamorous. It requires confronting your own immaturity. It means admitting that your anger is not always justified, that your fear is not always based on reality, that your sadness sometimes becomes a comfort zone instead of a signal for change. It means sitting with yourself in silence, tracing your reactions back to their roots, and doing the hard work of replacing harmful patterns with healthier ones. It means not blaming others for your emotional outbursts, but taking ownership of your responses. It means learning to breathe before speaking, to pray before acting, to wait before reacting. And each time you do, you gain authority over your inner world. The reward for emotional discipline is not just external success, it's internal peace. When you are no longer ruled by every move, every offense, every disappointment, you find freedom. You no longer fear other people's behavior because you are confident in your response. You no longer dread conflict because you know how to manage it. You no longer run from pressure because you know how to stay grounded. That inner stability becomes your strength. It becomes your compass. It becomes the foundation from which you build a life that cannot be shaken by every storm. And perhaps most importantly, emotional discipline honors your purpose. You cannot fulfill a divine assignment while being ruled by temporary feelings. Destiny requires clarity, and clarity comes through control. You must train yourself to say no to what feels urgent if it threatens what is truly important. You must learn to protect your peace, not just for comfort, but for strategy. You must learn to let go of emotional drama so you can focus on eternal impact. You must grow up internally if you want to rise externally. Because the higher you go, the more disciplined you must become. Influence demands stability. Favor requires stewardship. And the greatest indicator that you are ready is not how much you want it, but how well you can handle yourself when your emotions are triggered. You cannot control what happens around you, but you can always control what happens in you. You may not be able to stop the wind, but you can anchor your soul. You may not be able to change the people in your life, but you can master your own behavior. You may not be able to predict the future, but you can prepare for it by becoming someone who will not be moved by pressure. That level of control begins with emotional discipline. It is the secret power of every stable, successful, impactful life. Not louder, not faster, not more dramatic, just consistent, steady, disciplined, and intentional. Because when you rule your spirit, you rule your world. My friend, if you desire to rise above the storms of life, then you must first take dominion over the storm within. Every kingdom rises and falls based on leadership, and the first kingdom God gave you to govern was the one within your own soul. The mind, the will, the emotions, this is your territory. This is the ground of your authority. You cannot legislate peace in the world if there is no order in your thoughts. You cannot demand respect from others if your emotions are still your master. You were never created to be ruled by feeling. You were created to be led by purpose. Emotional mastery is not weakness. It is divine strength under control. It is not the absence of emotion, but the proper placement of emotion. It is choosing to respond with wisdom when anger wants to lead. It is standing still in faith when fear whispers lies. It is loving with clarity when offense knocks on the door. When you train your mind to govern your emotions, you become a person of influence, a person of integrity, a person of destiny. You will never fulfill your assignment by being led by reaction. You will never reach the promise if you are always retreating into emotional comfort zones. Growth requires discipline. Authority demands stability. Power must be anchored by peace. It is not enough to pray for a better life. You must become the person who can manage it. The throne you seek outside must first be established inside. So rule well. Rule your spirit. Govern your thoughts. Master your emotions. Because the future belongs to those who are not just gifted, but governed. Those who are not just inspired, but anchored. Those who are not just called, but controlled. That is the evidence of maturity. That is the mark of a true leader. And that is the posture of a life prepared for greatness.